This week on Forever Spinning, we take a look at one of the most influential female punks to ever take the stage as we study Patti Smith's debut album, Horses. Smith was born in Chicago in 1946, but moved across the country to Germantown, Philadelphia at the age of 4. She would move a few more times until her family finally settled in Deptford Township, New Jersey. Patti was the oldest of 4 children, her mother being a jazz singer turned waitress and her father a machinist at a Honeywell plant. In 1967, she dropped out of Glassboro State College, now Rowan University, and moved to Manhattan. While working at a bookstore, she met photographer Robert Mapplethorpe, with whom she would have a turbulent sexual relationship with. It was Robert who first introduced her to the wacky world of Andy Warhol and his various projects. Patti was inspired by Warhol, but she was more inspired by the musical acts that she would see perform at Max's Kansas City and CBGB's, both notorious music venues for people to perform at in New York City at the time. Acts like Blue Oyster Cult and the Velvet Underground inspired her to begin working on her own type of art as she began studying spoken word poetry. This later would become the crux of her music, this spoken word punk poetry. She credits Mapplethorpe for pushing her into this lifestyle, citing this in her autobiographical book, Just Kids, that Mapplethorpe was, quote, the artist of her life. She would go on to form the Patti Smith Group, releasing the first single in 1974, a cover of Hey Joe, backed with Piss Factory. Her debut record was produced by none other than John Cale of the Velvet Underground fame. It wasn't until November 10th, 1975 that Smith would release her debut record, Horses, on Artista Records after being recorded at Electric Lady Studio. The first and only single from Horses was a cover of the Van Morrison tune Gloria. However, this cover quickly divulges from the original as the opening lines to the song are, Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. This punk ethos is carried in full throughout the remainder of the track, as well as the album in its entirety. When asked about this controversial opening line, Smith claims that she, quote, was only 20 when she wrote that, and it was sorta her youthful manifesto. If anything, this cover and reinterpretation of this track shows the brilliance of a woman who is pushing the boundaries of what rock music could be. While Gloria shows off Smith's impeccable ability to add a punk edge to an otherwise unpunk song, Free Money shows Smith's genius writing ability. Free Money is a track that is heavily influenced and infused by Smith's personal life experiences, and in this case, growing up poor. This track feels like slam poetry night on steroids. The music steadily rises and falls in parallel with her lyrics, which depict a person who dreams of an influx of cash. This money is not earned or rewarded, but it's won by chance. She sings early on in the track, find a ticket, win the lottery, scoop the pearls up from the sea. This quote-unquote free money was really never intended to be given to a hardworking individual, but it was rather to be a prize won by somebody who just had a stroke of luck. You can hear her yearning and wishing for this money to swiftly fall into her lap, something I'm sure she dreamt about throughout her young adulthood life. The final song that I would like to cover from this album is one of Smith's most popular, Land. Land is also commonly referred to as Horses. This track, spanning nearly 10 minutes in length, goes through 3 different moods, the first being Horses, the second being The Land of a Thousand Dances, and the third being La Mer. This track works in everything, from references to Little Richard's Land of a Thousand Dances to copious talk of drug use at the time. In an interview, Smith explained that the character Johnny from this track is a metaphor for the birth of rock and roll. This epic of a track does a fantastic job of thrashing back and forth like a bad high and taking these ideas and throwing them against a wall and watching them all stick in unison. It's a hodgepodge of words that represent a snapshot of the time, a technique that Smith would use for many works to come. On a first listen, it is apparent that Smith would go on to have an incredibly influential and important musical career. She built her whole career on brilliant poetry, sheer will, and a whole lot of drugs. You now might be able to see how so many people classify her as one of the driving forces in the early days of punk, not only in its music, but also its mantra. Sure, it definitely helps to have John Cale, a bona fide genius, behind the mixing board. None of this would have been even possible without Smith's poetry and her force of will in the first place. Smith never saw herself as a musician, as it is cited many a time in her autobiography Just Kids. But after being pushed into the music career, she would be an important figure for many years to come. As punk fans, we owe a lot to Smith's early work. Her kind of fuck it attitude would go on to inspire musicians and artists in general for years to come. Horses is easily one of the most important and pivotal records to come out of the New York City scene in the early and mid-70s, even rivaling contemporaries such as the Velvet Underground or the New York Dolls. And in my opinion, punk would be absolutely nothing without the incredible work and the brilliant mind of Patti Smith. So, whether you've never heard of this record before, or if it's a personal favorite of yours, Patti Smith's Horses will always be forever spinning. Thanks for watching.